you very much. Yeah, so if I start to talk very fast or very low, just let me know. I hope it's clear for everyone. Cool, so welcome. We are very excited to be here. We prepared with lots of love, but it's a session for you. So we really want you to learn as much as you can and kind of interact and ask questions whenever you want. We are going to present a few things. So Laura and I are going to do something more interactive at the end. And we have lots of concepts, but feel free to just put your hands up and interrupt me at any time. So that's the session for you. Today we are going to talk about what it means to be an analyst on the consulting world. So we work mainly with data. So Aginic is a data consultancy company, and we help clients to deliver their business solutions. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So today, before we start, so I am Camila. I am a senior data analyst for Aginic. We have Lara today as well. She's a data analyst, and we have Sami. Yeah, so Sami is the lead for the analyst chapter in Aginic. Beautiful. So today we are going to talk a little bit about Aginic. So what we do was kind of what it means to be a consulting company in the data world. Also, we are going to share a little bit about the case study that is from one of our clients that we worked with them, I'd say like a year and a half ago to develop the solution that we are going to show. But we keep working with them. So it's a client that we have a good engagement. It's a really good case study that we are going to share with you. Then Lara is going to talk a little bit about the tech skills and how we implement that in real world problems to bring the data-driven solutions. And then also how we tell the story with the data. Because data can be very boring, but sometimes when we tell the story in a good way, it can be very exciting. Cool, so who we are, like what is Aginic? So basically, we solve problems differently. We are a data consultancy, and we have different skills in our team. So we three here, we are data analysts, so we basically get the data and we transform the data, but we also work with data engineers that is more like back-end, where they get the data from the client, do injections, and then we can, like as an analyst, we can access the data. Then we also have people that is not very technical, but they have different capabilities. So we have the designers who support us to understand the problem. So they do, we are going to see here, they do lots of interactions with the client to support them to really visualize what they need. And the designers are amazing with us because we as analysts, we just care about the numbers. We don't really care about the colors and the shapes. And the designers help us to kind of build the solution in a really good way. And we also have the delivery chapter that is people with project management skills, and we work with Agile. So it's just a methodology that we use to deliver quickly and like fail in a very fast way, interacting with the client and identifying what they really need instead of building the whole thing, like spend lots of time, and then when they come to the end, it's kind of, that's not really what I wanted to do. So the deliveries, they help us a lot during this process and they managing the projects. Cool. So here are some of our clients. You can see that we have lots of different industries. We have health industry, that's like big part of our clients, but we also have education, and we also have finance and different other industries as well. So we have calls, insurance, banks, different industries, and the main part with that is not just the industry that is different, but also the technologies that we use. So for each client, we use a different technology. So we can come to a client and they say, hey, we use Microsoft, so let's build a solution with Microsoft products. Some of them, they say, I use on-premise or on the cloud. So we also have to be very adaptable to solve the problems based on what the client needs and what the technologies that they have. So we don't want to create something on the side and say, let's say as the client, what do you want? Okay, we see you in a month. We go like in the back end and develop something and come back with the solution. What we do is not that. What we do is we work as a team. We identify what the client have, how we can use the tools that they already have and they already use to develop solutions that will be part of their day-to-day work. So it's not creating something new, but also creating something that they can just implement in their day-to-day work, right? So when we think about a consulting company, that's the beauty. You work with different industries, but also and mainly with different technologies as well. Cool. So case study. So we worked, as I mentioned, around like a year and a half ago with Wine Australia. Wine Australia is a company, is a institution that they talk about, like they mention about how to they export and like what the wines we are getting in Australia, what's the wine industry. So they talk about everything about wine, right? So the case study was mainly to, like they came to us with a problem, and to solve this problem, we use design thinking. So design thinking is a methodology that we use to understand the problem with the client and to build the solution. As I mentioned before, we work with Agile. That's how we deliver the project, and the design thinking supported us to understand the problem. So the design thinking is, there are a few steps there. One of them is, the first one is emphasize the problem. So it's kind of understanding what the client really means when they say, hey, I have a problem, I need you to support me with that. Then we are going to define the problem, we are going to ideate, we are going to prototype, and then we test. So there is, I don't know if have you ever heard about design thinking before? Okay. Have you ever heard about the diamonds? Like the, yeah? So you basically, so when you go to the emphasize, you are getting lots of ideas. So you basically are diverging, getting lots of ideas, lots of cool stuff that they, like lots of things that they think that can solve the problem. And then when you go to define, you basically converge the problem. So you are, based on all the ideas that you have, what makes sense. So let's kind of prioritize a few of your ideas. And then we diverge again, and then we can ideate the solution, and then we converge again, and then we can prototype the solution, right? So it's, the design thinking helps the client to bring the ideas, but then help them as well to prioritize based on what they want to solve. So it's a very good methodology to solve the problems, and we use that a lot in Aginic. Beautiful. So they came to us and they said, hey, we have few things that we do normally manually, but the main problem here is that we have lots of information, but we don't have a good way to share that with the client. So we don't have the engagement from our clients is kind of not very high. So we want to find ways to give information for the client to basically any one of us, we can go to the website and like how we can explore the data from there. Because before it was, hey, we need a report, and they would go to their database and explore the report and deliver to someone. So it was very ad hoc, and they wanted to improve their customer engagement. So that was the main thing, right? They also wanted to improve that in a way that they could visualize the data and get the data in a kind of just on the spot, like the current data, not wait a month for a report, right? So that was the main problem. So they came to us and they said, hey, that's the current state, can you help us with that? So to do that, we were kind of, okay, let's, remember I mentioned on the design thinking, let's understand what's in there, like let's diverge, get lots of ideas and understand the problems. So in this case, we are ideating we are emphasizing the problem. So we are still understanding as a consultant, they came with the problem, but okay, what it really means. What do you mean when you say you want to engage the client? What do you mean when you say you want to visualize that in a better way? So it's kind of really understanding what is in their minds. The way we do that is with some workshops. So we have lots of workshops that is to basically get what's on the client mind and put in a paper, basically, so we can we can be talking about the same thing. So we have the workshops here for business problems. So for example, we have goals and objectives on the top there. Sorry, I didn't practice to point to the top, but on the top here, on the goals, we have few sticks there, and then you can see there is few dots. Can you see the blue dots there? So basically it's kind of, okay, that's all the goals, all the objectives, but let's really prioritize, like everyone together with the client on the stakeholders, we can prioritize, okay, what do you mean with your goals? Like, for example, my goal can be, I want to, I don't know, I can say, I want to show the client what is the current, the most, the best wines that we sell, or the wines that are more expensive. Lara goals can be, no, I don't want to sell, I don't want to show that. I want to see what are the wines that we are importing more, like how much they cost, or for a specific month. So we have different ideas. At the end of the day, it's kind of a very similar objective, but we have to kind of, let's define that in a better way and let's prioritize. So we can kind of talk about the same thing. So we kind of define the goals and objectives, and then what are the stakeholders? Like, who are the stakeholders? What are their needs? And also what are their pain points? So in this phase here, we really want to solve something for them, because we can create a beautiful dashboard, a beautiful solution, but if it doesn't solve their pain points, if they still have to go to the data and do like manipulations or export the data or spend like hours doing some transformations, we didn't solve their pain points, right? So what we want to do here is, okay, you have all these ideas, but what is something that really would bring value to your day-to-day work, right? So we are mapping everything here. There is no right and wrong. There is no like we don't say no. That's not what we want to focus. All the ideas here are good, and we map everything at this moment, right? Cool. Any questions in this phase? Beautiful. Cool. So we have everything mapped. We put some priorities there. We align few ideas. Now what we are going to do is define. So we are going to converge. So we are going, based on everything that we mentioned before, how we can define what we are really going to work, right? So at this moment, we start to ask questions about, okay, if we want to solve this problem or to solve this pain point, what is available there? Like, how is the data? How can I get this information? So let's say what I mentioned, Lyra wanted to see how many liters of wine we are selling in a specific month. That's cool, but do I have the data for that? Can I access that somehow? So we start to question the client, is that solution that you want, like is that this idea, is that really possible? So we start to ask a few questions. In this case here, we start to ask, okay, maybe you have for every month, or maybe you have the number of wines that you imported and you have the price, but do you have per month? If you have per month, do you have the price? You know, like we start to ask, how is the data? Is the month in you can start to ask like, is the month in is a written? Let's say March is a MAR, or is that 03? Like how is the data presented? Is that in a way that you can understand, or is sometimes it's March is MAR, sometimes it's 03? How consistent is that? So you start to understand, like to investigate a little bit about what is available for you. We go very deep, so this is just one simple example, but we understand like how the data is available and how we can connect to provide the solution, right? One really good way to do that we have the data discovery workshops, and there is one methodology, basically like a way to conduce the client to provide the information we need, is using the business there's basically we go deep on the data, but we focus on, okay, we have everything there, but we don't need to know all the data. We need to know the data to develop your solution. So this workshop conduces a lot in this perspective, like, okay, we have everything, but what we need, do we have what we need to provide the solution for you? Cool, beautiful. So in this case for Wine Australia, what we realized at the end of these workshops and these conversations is we prioritized two problems that they had. One was the vintage survey. So in this case, the current solution, what they were doing at this moment, was collecting data in an Excel spreadsheet and doing that manually. And then the data source was the survey. So they got the survey and put that everything in a spreadsheet. And the other one, the other solution they wanted was to export some data, and they were doing that ad hoc. So it's basically, if you are a user, you come to Wine Australia and say, hey, I want to see wines, like Lara comes to Wine Australia and say, I want to see wines that you sold in March. And then we can come, we go to the database manually and we export this data and send to that to the user. So that was the two things that we were doing. We mapped the data source, we mapped how the data was, and then we start to understand a little bit more how we are going to provide the solution. Cool. So the other step here is to ideate. So we know what we want, we know the pain points. Now it's kind of how we are going to provide the solution. How can the user visualize the solution, basically? So here we are going to ask them, you want to see the wines for per month? How? Like, what's a good way for you to see that? Do you want that as a list, as a table? Do you want that as a chart? Do you want that as with filters? How? And then some people, they have a very clear way of kind of, it's like they can visualize what they want. So what we do in this case is kind of, hey, get a paper, get a pen, and just draw what you can see, like in your mind, like tell us what you really need. Some people, they can't. Like in this case here with the concepts, it's people like really drawing that, but sometimes you have to come here and say, all right, let's, if you cannot really visualize what you are doing, let's go to the next step, and like we can help to build together. And then we start to put the ideas together from the initial sketch that they developed. We start to put ideas together, and then we come to this initial very low concept prototype. So in here we have few pages, few ways to display. We kind of ask them, is that more or less what you need? And they say yes. Then we can play around and do in a different way to basically create the real prototype, right? So we are basically validating things here. Cool. So after they validate everything, they say we go as like the designers, they go back behind the scenes and they create the prototype, and they do an amazing job. As I mentioned before, like they know all the colors and shapes and how to put things together. So they created this prototype here. I will show you how. Oops. Why is that now? Yeah. So that's the prototype they created. So they used Figma. That's one tool to develop integration, like a really good way to iterate with the prototype. So in this case here, that's Figma. And then if I click anywhere, like, can you see the blue thing popping up there? Cool. So it says, basically this prototype just works if I click there. So I go to the market insights, and then if I click anywhere again, it will say, hey, you have to go to the data crusher, and then I go there. So this one is guiding the user to click where we want them to click, right? And then I come here to the export dashboard, I click there, and that's not real data, but can you see here, for example, you can see that's not real data because you have the value. So value, value, value. There's no, the numbers are not like right there, like the pie charts, they are exactly the same, the donuts. But if I click anywhere here, I can say, you can select the variety, for example. and then let's say I select few things and nothing happens. However, the user can understand how is the functionality for this dashboard. Does it make sense? Questions? Cool. So this is a really good way for the user to interact because they see where they can click, how they can visualize the data. If they go to another page, how it will look like more or less. There is no data in there yet. So during this time when the designers are building this prototype, we as analysts and engineers, we are behind the scenes investigating the data, checking if what we collected from the steps before is really what we have, if we can develop the visuals that the designers are creating. So we use this time to build the pipeline, everything that goes behind the scene to provide the user with this final dashboard, right? So far we just developed the prototype, and then when the user validated everything and they say, yes, that's what I want, then the engineers and the analysts, they come with the data. In this case, we built the dashboard in Power BI, and it's available if you want to use, so you can access on the Wine Australia. However, we already used the prototype, and you know how to access that. So if you go to Wine Australia, you go to Marketing Insights, and you go to Interactive Insights. So they changed a little bit the name here. Then when you go to the Export Dashboard, if you click there, you can see the real dashboard in Power BI. So that's what we built with Wine Australia, and you can see here are the real numbers. So as a user, as a kind of, so if someone likes wine here, if you want to go to the Wine Australia, you can see this data is available for everyone. And then you can, exactly as a prototype, you can interact with the filters as well on the top, right? And this here is real data. This is collecting data from their current database. You can see here when it was refreshed as well. Cool. Any questions? All good? All right, cool. I give to Lara so she can tell how we solve this problem.
Let me just, can you hear me? I was trying to, okay, if you cannot hear me, just let me know that I can use the microphone. Yeah, great. So, what Camila was referring to in all those steps, we consider as the steps that we take in the business perspective. So when she was referring to having the data in Excel spreadsheet, for example, and extract the data, this is our source, so when we get the input. And then in the business perspective, we do what is called like business rules. So how the volume is going to be split across states, for example. How we can define states that there are like multiple types of wine, for example. These are types of rules that we have to define in the business perspective. To then move to the dashboard, that is the data visualization. When you think about data, this is, we go into different layers, but to do the same, exactly the same thing. So when you talk about the source, like taking the data from Excel and then collecting everything, we are talking about not exactly Excel, but in big numbers when we talk about data, we are talking about data extraction, when you have the raw data that you want to collect to then do something. And then usually what we do is store in some place that is like the step of data storage. Then we start transforming in the business rules that the business wants to see. In this step, we call data manipulation, that is all these transformations, and data modeling, which means that we are taking different tables and we are kind of merging, connecting in a certain relationship between them. To then, once we have our data totally transformed, we go and move to the dashboard, that is our data visualization step. When we think about tools that Camila was referring before in terms of clients, that we use the tools that the client needs, we can have different tools according to the step of layers that we are talking about the data. So in data extraction, the main companies that we have is Fivetran, Stitch, and Azure Data Factory. In data storage, can have in cloud or on-premise. So we are talking about SQL Server, Snowflake, Databricks, BigQuery from Google, and Azure database, but there are many of other options. When you're talking about data manipulation and modeling, which is more like, can be like programming or not much programming, we're talking about SQL, dbt to use data transformation, Power BI and Click are BI tools that can connect the tables, so it's the part of data modeling, and SAS is also a little bit of like programming. And then we move to the data visualization that usually are BI tools. So it's Power BI is the most famous one, ClickSense, Looker from Google, and Tableau. Have you guys ever heard about any of those names, more or less? Yeah, and even like, for example, data extraction is more to in the data engineering side, and from data storage, middle of data storage to data manipulation, modeling, and data visualization is more the analyst side in terms of roles that an analyst can do. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah?
Do you have a go-to tool for each of those categories each time, or does it depend on like the client?
The client depends also like the problem that the client wants to solve. If it's more related with storage, for example, the client can choose a platform, as like Camila was saying, and then we take the, like, for example, we are using SQL Server, and we are just doing everything more related with SQL. Or we can have an end-to-end solution that we call, that we use all those steps of like the transformation from the extraction until the visualization. So it depends really into the problem that we want to solve. Yeah. Oh, you can start.
Yeah, sorry, you mentioned, I missed the part where you said the analyst was more involved in this search.
Yes.
I guess, could you explain what are the stakeholders you work with in each of those things?
In those.
So it's like the data, the 4 steps, and you explain like what people work with in those 4 steps. Data extraction, storage.
In terms of project, the client will be like the same. So when you're saying about roles that we can have engineers and analysts, but sometimes an analyst can be also a little bit like engineer. So when you're talking about collecting the data, like taking data from a raw source and how to optimize the storage to like blob stores, for example, in Databricks, we're talking more about engineering side of that. Once the data is not kind of ready, but when we want to do like the transformation of like connecting the tables and see what is like the primary key, I'm not sure if like the names comes, if it's too technical, you let me know. But connecting the primary keys, finding how I'm going to connect what with what. We are talking like the start of being analyst, and then we can go to the visualization that is also an analyst side of that. Is it your question? Yes?
Just one comment there. Because we work a lot with the client, like we are interacting with them all the time. The main challenge for us from the technical perspective is how we translate that from the business, because like the client, the business client, they will be in all the steps, right? Like they don't really know what we are doing behind the scenes. Maybe they have someone from their team that's an engineer or analyst that can help us to build the solution. But at the end of the day, it's how you translate everything from the business perspective. Because behind the scenes, they don't really care about how we are doing the things, but they have the really good inputs from the business rules and how we are doing the transformations and the manipulation. So it's important to have business people involved in all the steps as well.
You had one question?
I was wondering, like, so obviously you guys are working externally from companies that you're consulting with.
Yeah.
There might be like sensitive or maybe private data from companies. How do you guys deal with that when you're building data analysis models and things like that?
usually we sign a contract of confidentiality, so we cannot present the data to anyone else, or we cannot save in our like send to email, for example, like anything like external, we cannot do anything. Like we work and then we send to them, and that is, or usually we work in their environment. So what I mean is that we don't export anything from their environment to any other part.
Yeah, some clients we even have their own computers as well. So we don't use our computer. If we use our computer, we use virtual machines, so we can kind of remote, or we can have their own computers as well. Is that what you asked?
Yeah, yeah. Because I was imagining that would be like a big concern.
It is.
And
Yeah.
especially because we came from like being a startup that was 6 people, it's never a risk that we wanted to deal with. So as a general rule, we don't bring any client data onto our personal laptops. So it's always connecting to their like environment and then working within their environment. There are obviously like exceptions, but when that happens, we're kind of like saying, okay, well, if you're going to send that, you need to take out anything that's like personally identifiable and anything that's sensitive before we touch it.
Yep.
Question on that, how do you work when you've only got 6 people?
So we used to, like the first client that we ever had was Queensland Health and Queensland Audit Office. The founders, Brett and Marty, kind of spun off from EY and started their own company, so they had a lot of contacts from their EY days. And then they kind of grew, and so now we've got like 110 people, and we just got acquired by Mantle Group, so that company now, including us, is about 800 people.
So I will start talking a little bit more. Our focus now will be like more in data visualization, so in the final layer of the data aspects. And what you have to think when we are like creating a dashboard is more what Camila was saying about thinking in the user, who will be the user. So thinking of like the example of Wine Australia. When we want to see a dashboard that is all about wines, we can think of like who will be the users, who will access the website. And then we can think of like exporters, producers of wine, or people just interested in wine that want to know a little bit more about it. So we can think of like creating a dashboard with the mindset of, I can need to create a dashboard that has either the high level of like the entire Australia, and for people who have no idea, to then kind of like drill down into more specific answers that people might have. So just going to the dashboard, the real dashboard, what you can see here is that in the top, at the top of the dashboard, we can have the what you call like the big numbers, the total volume, the total value that is like 2.1 billion, to then compose the average per liter. So the total value is divided by the volume. It's composed like in 3.33 cents. And this is representing the entire Australia in terms of production of wine. When we go a little bit down, we get into a little bit more detail in terms of, I can see that in terms of production, there is like a majority of red wine, and then compare with the white wine. And we have like much more bottle of wines instead of bulk wine. Also, what we can see is we can compare year by year in terms of production. And then we can see like in the big numbers that year by year compared with last year, we had a really big decrease in terms of production and selling. And if we go into the chart at the right, divided by the types of grapes, we can see that this representation goes almost in every type of grape, which means that probably it was like COVID related, that we had a really decrease year by year. So this is the type of idea that we have to think of, like how to create something that goes into the high level, to then goes a little bit more detail in terms of what the user might be looking for. Going back to, in terms of visualization, how we can do that. So which type of data is better to what type of chart? I'll be trying to kind of compare, go all the time to the wine Australia to be a little bit more useful for you in terms of understanding. But when you have comparison, we can use like 2 different colors as I was mentioning before in the visualization, in the dashboard. We can use a composition from part to whole. Correlation when you want to see 2 different axes, like compare X and Y. Location is always like really visual it's helpful, useful to see quite well the location. Time comparison when you have like a time series, for example. Distribution when you want to compare different categories. And the KPIs that would be like the kind of high level detail that I was referring before. Also, what would be like a good practice in terms of data visualization? Our eye always comes from the left to the right because it's our way of reading. So it's always good to have, in terms of visualization, the most important elements at the top left and in the center to then move into the right. So at the top right is not important, but is a kind of like sequence of ideas to then go into more detail, as I was explaining before, until have like tables or something that doesn't need to get so much attention at the top. We can see this same idea here in the dashboard when we have like the most important part is the volume and the value, like what is the money that we are talking about. And then we go like drilling down into like what is the percentage. So let me just have one example like South Australia. I can have like knowing what is the composition, the total composition, and how it represents in terms of comparison with the entire Australia. And then I go to the more detail that I was referring to until getting to like the time series that I was referring, like when we have the values moving along the time. Okay. Good practice for visualization. It's always good to start in the X0, unless you have specific reasons for not using that. Try to, if you are talking about one type of data, try to represent this all the time the same color to not cause like confusion. If you want to highlight, of course, that you can make use of colors, but as long as you want to highlight, don't use like different colors that you can also like create confusion. Be aware of people, colorblind people, and try to maximize the data to ink ratio, which means that once you are creating a dashboard, try to make all the information valid, like relevant. We don't want to create information that we don't need when we are just putting there because it seems nice. We can also have what not to do in terms of visualization. I was putting 2 different charts that I'd like to have your ideas of. Can you see in the left and the right chart what would be not nice in terms of visualization? Does anyone want to have a guess?
It's a bit like unclear, especially on the right one. Like names by week, the week's not really ordered. Do you read this way or do you read like that way?
Yeah, no, it's exactly that. Like in the right part, we are talking about time, and usually what we do is use like for time series something that we can follow along the time, how the time is flowing, and have like the dimension of how much. And here is more like showing the bubble, like the size, but it's not clear when something was happening. The left one, does anyone have an idea what wouldn't be so nice?
The difference is 25%, but it looks like it's massive.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Like they are trying to compare the salary of like 20 less people earning less and 20 more, but they were using the salary as the dimension. So definitely like a histogram or something would be much easier to understand the data. Cool. So what I want to do now is give another example of dashboard that we created, but we will be doing a little bit of hands-on in this dashboard. So just as in terms of context, we create a dashboard for it's called Greenfield Utilities, which is not of course, the real name of the government. But what Greenfields Utility does is manage manage water utilities in the state of Greenfield. So what is the problem? They want to define in a data-driven way how to regulate and create like funding to reinvest in assets that are depreciating. So imagine that they have different assets in different projects and a lot of like assets, like random assets. And what happens is that the assets start to depreciate. So because they depreciate, they have an index that is called health index that they can measure how healthy or not this asset is, which means that one asset that is below 40 is considered healthy, and when it's above 70 is considered the need for reinvestment. And because we are talking about depreciation, what happens is that if they don't reinvest, there is a risk related with that in terms of failure and also monetary risk. So what they wanted to do is using this composition of different assets and how to show the assets moving along the time and connected with the risk of failure. So let's go to the dashboard. So what we did here, we create like different tabs. One is the overview, so it's the main part of the dashboard. And then I'll just show you the second page. That is when we go into the types of projects. So imagine here at the top that I can select different projects. I'll be like in this pump station. I have in this project, the start year and the end of year with the project owner. How will be the costs related with the project? And here at the bottom, I have what I was referring to. There is a chart related with the number of assets and how would be the composition of the health index along the time. Which means that in the first years, I think that's not showing, it's not showing properly, but it's like 2021 and 2022, all the assets are healthy. And what happens is that they start depreciating until the point that all of them are really risky. And then we have the chart here at the right with the risks related with that, which means that in the beginning they are healthy, so they don't have risks. But then, as long as they start depreciating, there is a risk associated with that. And then if we go in more detail, we have each asset, how is the composition along the time. So what I want you to do is, I don't know if all of you have laptop, but if you can access this link here, that we can move into the view. Let me know if you can access it. I'll just. Yep. Okay. So I will just skip this part of presentation because I think that we will not have time for that. But what you can see here that there are like different dashboards. So pick one of those dashboards and imagine that this is the first page. So the dashboard that I was presenting before was the second page related with the project. So we were already talking about each detail of the project. So imagine that you have to create the first page of the dashboard. How would you put the order of the charts in the dashboard? And this is an activity. I'll give you like 5 minutes, maybe because of the time.
So you have the visuals on the side, and then it's just basically like dragging.
Yeah, drag and drop.
and dropping.
Oh, and if anyone have any question, like feel free to ask. Oh, can I bring this information? otherwise we will not get time for discussion. But does anyone want to share like what you thought about like how to build this dashboard? What were your thoughts, or if it was difficult or not?
Definitely difficult to fit everything on there.
Yeah, yeah.
Almost everything.
No, I usually. I'm sorry. No, you can go.
I was just going to say it's hard managing the dev space.
No, and usually like what we have is we always have a lot of data and like a lot of information, but how to take the data and apply it to something and make this flow of information to make sense, it actually is quite hard. Does anyone want to share like your ideas of? Okay, I think that I will not have time. So anyway, I will just show.
Just a comment before we move. If we go back,
Which one's the best one?
well, that's the thing. There is no right and wrong, right? Depends a lot of what the client wants to see as well. So I think it's if you see the dashboards here, you are using the same visuals, but everyone created something different. And the main thing is sometimes you start to play with that, and then maybe we can change a little bit. Maybe we can put in a different format. But what Clara mentioned before is normally we go. I just don't want to go on this one that's on the table that's on the on the opposite side. But yeah.
Yeah, this I think that I wouldn't do that.
I think that's a very like the UI there is very hard. But even this one, right? Like we can have the main numbers on the top, then we go into more details, and normally the table you normally go the last one because that's where you can go and explore like row by row and all the details in there. There is no right and wrong. Like keep that in mind. That's why we have designers as well to help us because then we can kind of do the prototype and validate the ideas before we build that. But yeah, it's good to see that everyone put in a different way.
Yeah, and try to not put in like the opposite side.
I like this one that they like someone put the filter point
Yeah.
very clear. That's a filter there.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of good ideas. I'm not on the opposite.
Yeah, I would just show how we did it. Actually, like for this chart. But what we did was like putting the filters at the top, the higher level numbers at the top left. Again, as I was saying, like this is related with risk, cost, like money. So this is like the most important information. And then we go into okay, once we have the big numbers, how we can go into more detail. So then we divide in terms of category, flow over the years, to then, as Camila was saying, go into even more detail. So we put the table at the bottom if someone wants to see more detail. But there is no right or wrong answer, as long as you don't put in the upside down. But I think that the idea here was more in terms of when we were talking about data, we usually think of like data or data analysts like just in terms of programming. This is definitely like we do, but we have to think of like in the all the other problems that we want to solve. So how to also think in the business side and how to create the data that makes sense and how to create really insights out of it. Yeah, and I think that this. Oh, I'll just put it. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Just on the topic of data privacy as well, I was also sort of wondering, I assume you guys use machine learning models occasionally to analyze data. Do you guys ever work with organizations that have separate databases, like they won't even combine their databases because they're worried about the data being more dangerous if it's together? Have you ever approached or seen companies that do that, and how do you work with that?
So the one that kind of comes to mind is when I was working with like a health organisation a few years ago. It's kind of two main data sets they collect. There's the activity, which is like everything that happened, and then there's the costing data set, which is like how much everything
of course, the big four consultancy companies, so Deloitte, EY, but there are other consultancy, like data consultancy companies. Do you? Yeah, Seven is. I think that we are really well qualified for like the data analytics and especially the engineering part we do really well. So we are highly technical, and because we are also combining, as Camila said, different skills. So we have like the designers and we work in agile. Definitely we get really out of it in terms of understanding the business in a really deep level that most of the time the clients, when we start relationship with a client, we keep this relationship for a really long time. So this is our success so far.
You guys also continue to provide support for these softwares that you build?
Yeah, we have kind of support work, but we don't like so much, because what we do is we have a project and we work together with the client. And we are really intentional in this, in terms of we build a solution, we build together in terms of teaching the client of how to do it, kind of like upskilling the client, so that once we leave, they are able to take the solution and just keep doing the solution. So we are much more willing to have different problems instead of be like just maintaining the solution that we created. We are really strong in that, in like upskilling the client as well.
So just what do you look for in your graduates then?
What we are looking for, and well, of course that we are not like we are now applying. Actually, like the grad position we are is available now. Like it's we are taking for in January 23. It will be like the intake for the grant. We are looking for more people who are willing to learn. So because we have different skills, we are not looking for one specific skill. If you have the knowledge of at least like knowing one programming language and knowing at least like one BI tool and having the willingness to learn other tools quick, this is definitely what we are looking for, of how you solve a problem, and if you solve in a different way, and like having this willingness to learn, this is what you're looking for.
I was just wondering about like the Mantle acquisition, because Mantle's like quite big in data and consulting and sort of analytics space. Is there any sort of what was the sort of motivation behind merging with them? Is there any other things you want to harness from like other companies in their ecosystem that you wanted to like work with?
It's largely just growth. So like it's just essentially about trying to get more resources in order to like grow our network so that we can reach out to more clients. And also, you know, we had that slide before where it showed all the different softwares that we work with, and it's impossible for every single one of us to be like technically deep in every single one of
It's a
those
huge
softwares.
variety.
And so, you know, we have done projects with AWS before, as an example, but we haven't done a huge amount in that space. Whereas within the Mantle Group, there's a brand called CMD, and they are the AWS Australia partners for the year. So that means that if we get into a client situation and they're very, you know, AWS heavy, we don't have to kind of like do all this research from scratch to figure out how to help them. We can actually just bring in someone from CMD and get them to kind of guide us in what we should be implementing for them. So there's benefits in terms of having companies in that space that are like a lot deeper in certain technologies than we are, because we're very like vendor agnostic. But also just in terms of having the different network and the different contacts that we can start reaching out to as well, because there are a lot of companies that we haven't started working with yet, and there are a lot of companies that they haven't started working with yet.
So if you were to working at Aginic, would you be sort of interfacing with these other groups and
Yeah,
sort of
so
harnessing their abilities?
the acquisition was announced, I think, like 2 weeks ago, and there's probably already like 3 or so projects where we're collaborating with speakers of like different resourcing requirements and things like that. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. A lot of opportunities in there.
Sorry?
A lot of different opportunities for projects.
Yeah.
No, and even like in terms of you being an analyst or like you work in the company, you have like a lot of opportunity to grow, like in terms of you can learn whatever you want, and there will be always people knowing something that you want to know. So it will be a really good opportunity. Okay, and we have like the QR code as well, like so feel free to apply if you want to. We have like the grad intake.
Yeah, I was just gonna say also, is anyone here like not quite last year, like final year yet? So I know you guys like your maths. Yeah, so I know that I know that UQ Maths has their like summer internship program every year, and so Aginic's got 2 positions in that as well if you're interested in just getting more into this case. So we've got 2 streams for that. One of them will be a lot more like data modeling and kind of visualization, but we've got one that's a lot more data science heavy as well. That one we have been a little bit more specific with what we want people to kind of have already learned, but you know, we've got a few months, so yeah, feel free to go through that.
If you're in that, emails for that just went out today as well. If you're not in that but you're still interested, I think you can still apply 8% code on the S&P website, or I suppose maybe the Aginic website as well.
No, I think for the summer internship one is through
It's just through
UQ. Yeah,
Okay,
but
cool.
we'll have a couple that are advertised through there.
Does anyone have any other questions?
I have a quick one.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm just curious how long ago were these case studies? Were they like recent projects or something like long ago?
I think that Wine Australia was in 2020 that it started. As Camila was saying, we still have continuous relation with the client, so we are always building something. It's not dashboard related anymore, it's more like the data part. And the second one, yeah, we are still having different projects as well with this client, but I think that was 2020 as well that it happened. Those dashboards.
Cool. Maybe a round of applause. So we have one for each of you as well.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Camilla, Laura, you guys get one as well.
Oh, thank you.
That's so nice. Thank you so much.
And Samantha.
I like it.
So if you're interested in a job with Aginic, maybe visit their website. Also, if you're in math, check out the S&P link. Check your student emails, it's in that inbox. If not, I'm sure they pass it over the UQ website as well. Apart from that, thanks for coming and talking to us, guys. The interactive part was pretty fun as well. I enjoyed that. That's pretty much it for tonight. We have pizza just outside if you guys want to stick around as well. And if you guys have any more questions that you want to ask,